I remember the last time I ever judged. With those words, I had probably the biggest, if not the greatest, shift in my life to a new space, a whole new way of living, a whole new adventure, a whole new perspective. The first time I heard that statement, it wasn't spoken by me, it was spoken by Don Miguel Ruiz, the author of The Four Agreements. I was speaking, as was he, at a Universal Lightworkers Conference in Florida many years ago. And we were both backstage waiting to go on to give our talk. And as we were sitting there, we chatted a little, and then he turned to me and very casually said, like he was commenting on a cup of coffee he just had, he simply turned to me and said, "You know, I recall the last time I ever judged. I recall the last time that I ever judged myself or anyone else. I remember where I was, what I was doing, what it felt like, and the space, the realization, the clarity that I was in when I realized that I no longer wanted to judge. I was sitting with my father and we were discussing life, and all of a sudden my whole life flashed in front of me. And as I reviewed and re-experienced my whole life, particularly all my relationships, as well as my own particular adventures, I realized that it no longer served me to judge, to evaluate, to compare, to contrast, to even have an opinion. And at that moment, I was in such a state of clarity that I just realized from the center of my being, from the bottom of my heart, from the center of my soul, I realized I am choosing to never judge again, just because I didn't want to. And at that moment, because I was in such a deep state, it took effect. And that was the last time that I ever judged myself or anyone else. And then all of a sudden, we got the hand signal that it was time for him to go on stage. So he left. He actually ended up talking about this in his talk that morning. And I was left there in that space. At first I was somewhat startled, particularly by the power of it and how it affected me. Because what it did is it triggered a spontaneous life review for myself. I was sitting there and all of a sudden I wasn't in that back room in that hotel. I was back upside down in my overturned truck, which had crashed many years ago, and I was dying in the truck. And as soon as I died, I was in a space, that same space, the same vibration, the same energy of total acceptance of just what is, with no thoughts, feelings, labels, evaluation, judgment, just being present in the moment. And as I found myself in that state, back when my car crashed and I died, I noticed I was in the presence of what I call my council of elders. Those are ascended masters, spirit guides, the beings, the beings with no names, the nameless ones, as well as the ones that let us give them names. And I was with this circle of advisors, spiritual advisors, and they were showing me a life review. They were showing me like a videotape, biographical video of my whole life. Everything I had done with everyone that I had done it with. And as we were viewing it, I noticed something very, very unique and different and strange. And also delightful. I didn't have any sense of evaluating or judging what I was seeing. And most of what I was seeing was the things that I'd done, that I regretted doing, that I wish I had done differently. I was noticing things I didn't do. I was noticing everything about my particular path and purpose and how well I did. And I fell short in most of it. Yet there was not any sense within me or my council of elders, any sense of feeling or emotion or response, let alone evaluation, let alone judgment. And I really remembered, and I'm in that space right now, and I can tap into that anytime I want, that space of just total acceptance of what is. The only time I'd ever had a tinge of it before, a glimpse of it, was perhaps with my grandmother. And perhaps you have with a grandfather or aunt or uncle or grandmother or a friend or a certain teacher. In the past it had only lasted, for a few minutes. And then my mind, my emotions would come up and I would buy into a response, a judgment, an evaluation of the situation. And at that moment, in this space that I'm in now, and at that moment, which exists in the eternal present now, I realized that I also, just like Miguel, in that moment backstage, as I was re-experiencing that moment in that eternal moment of being with my spiritual guides and my higher self, source, and God, I realized it no longer served me to judge myself or others. That it just wasn't useful anymore. It wasn't practical, it wasn't fun, it wasn't helpful. And at that moment, in that clarity, that aha, that insight, that realization, I simply made a very quiet but complete, total decision. I'm done with that. I'm finished with judgment. And at that moment, I made my last judgment. And I remember what it felt like. I'm feeling it now, that moment where I no longer judged myself or others. Now, over the next few years, of course my mind and my emotions, my programming, my conditioning would still come up with suggestions, critiques, evaluations, responses, reactions to situations. But what was different, what has been different ever since I had that moment of clarity and choice, and when I chose just total being, total acceptance, ever since that my mind and my emotions have no longer had the power to rob me of that moment of clarity and joy, to rob me of that space of just allowing whatever is to be whatever is. And the happiness, the joy, the peace that comes with that. And over the years, as my mind and my emotions try to rip me away, grab me away from that state of pure beingness, just pure awareness, it's had the mind and the emotions have had less and less power, less and less credibility, validity, less and less ability to shift me, to pull me out of the present moment. And over the years, their power has dwindled and decreased and diminished until now it's almost like just a quiet little voice way in the background. Something about, oh, you might have an opinion about this. And I just smile. Because I don't. I choose not to. It's very easy. And so I might ask you right now, is it time for you to allow yourself to feel, intuitively feel, sense your whole life, your whole soul's existence, everything you've ever experienced as a soul, and to review it, to feel it right now on an intuitive in your center, and see for yourself, is it helpful anymore to evaluate yourself or others, to compare, contrast, to have an opinion, to have a belief, to even have a thought? Does it serve you anymore to judge yourself or anyone or any aspect of life? And then just let go and see. See where this takes you. This open-ended question, this prayer, this request, this intention for clarity. And just let it play out and see what it brings you. Just let go, let God guide you with the question. So at some point you might also choose to decide. Choose to have the experience of the last time that you have ever judged. Thanks.